Yes, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm delighted to be in Canberra. In fact, before I got married, which is a while ago now, my wife was living in Canberra for a year, so I was coming here a few times. Well, that was back in 1980 actually, so it is a while ago. It's changed a bit since then, but it's nice to be back. Actually, I've been back a few times as well after that, but it's Canberra's a lovely city, so thank you very much for inviting me. So today, my topic is to do with interpretive research, which is one of the themes of the conference, and development, ICT for development. So I'm bringing those two things together. And the spark for this talk was really Alan Lee's keynote session at Paxis, which he gave just a few months ago in Chengdu, China, where he made the statement that interpretive research is objective. And then he gave some reasons for that. So I'll present what he said, give you a brief summary of what he said, then I'll give you my take on this comment that interpretive research is objective. And I'll relate it then to some work I've been doing with some of my students in ICT for development. And you can see how that fits. So I just thought I'd show you where I'm from, which is Auckland. And the reason I'm showing you this, of course, is because we have a few conferences coming up in Auckland soon. ISS in Australasian Conference in December, the week before ISS. And of course, Antonio is involved with that. I'm the conference co-chair of ISS. Shirley is the Doctor Consortium co-chair, so I know some of you are involved with these conferences. But of course, these are the main conferences in our region. ISS is the top Australasian conference in our field, and ISS, of course, is the top global conference. There's lots of other things happening as well, like WITS and WISE and IFIT, Wicker 8.2. So there must be something that you can attend, so just hope that you will come to Auckland. So this happens to be Shirley jumping off the Harbour Bridge in December. This you, Shirley? No? Doing a bungee jump? No? This is Auckland at night. That's the tallest building in the Southern Hemisphere, by the way, the Sky Tower. This is the city, and our campus is where we hold, well actually AUT and University of Auckland are very close together, and this is sort of a park. The downtown is just sort of cut off here, the CBD is right here, so it's right next to the CBD. But our University of Auckland campus is all around this area here. Our business school building's around here, and AUT is just up here. So you can see we're very close to the harbour. There's whales and dolphins out there, by the way. You can see hundreds of dolphins out there in the Gulf, if you want. And this is where well, for ISIS at least, where the conference will be held. It's in our business school building. So all the sessions of ISIS will be here. So that's my marketing spiel. I have to do that now and get on to my talk. So first of all, I'll tell you a bit about myself first, for those of you who don't know me. Then I'll get on to this topic of interpretive research. Is it objective? Then I'll relate it to some ICT for development examples and make some conclusions. So firstly, just tell you a little bit about me. You may not know it, but I was in a rock and roll band many years ago. And this rock and roll band, actually there's one person in that band that was in the same band as me, Russell Crowe. He was in the very same band. Not at the same time, unfortunately, but the same band. He came after me. I went to do my PhD to become famous. He decided to join this band. Because he was born in Wellington and this was in Auckland. Anyway, which one was me up there? Can you tell? Anastasia got it right. I'm the handsome one. So, actually, that's me there. I was a bit skinny on those days. That's when I played guitar. So that was me. We had a TV show and toured around the country, all in New Zealand. Didn't make it anywhere else. Anyway, that was before I did my PhD. Then I did a PhD, saw the light, moved from rock and roll and stuff to doing ethnography in anthropology. After that, joined IBM in a graduate hiring program. Worked for them for a few years, and then since 18 I've worked at the University of Auckland, where I'm now a professor. So that's my academic career. This is my official website, which I have on quality of research. I try and keep this one up, well, reasonably up to date. But it's about quality of research and interpretive research as well, of course. This is my unofficial website. Have you seen the Halloween movies of Michael Myers? These they're horror movies. This is what I do at night. This is just my day job. Now notice how sharp this knife is here. If you're not listening, I'll come to your dreams tonight. Anyway, they're bad movies, but anyway. And this is not me at all, of course. My clients have some power, so that's not me at all. I'd be a millionaire if I was that guy. Anyway, so now let's move on to my talk, which is the first part being interpretive research is objective. And Alan Lee, in his keynote at Paxos, as I said, he had these 7 lessons from philosophy, methodology, and history of science for IS research. And one of his lessons, I'm only going to touch on one of them. He had a few, the other 6, but I'm just going to focus on one of them, which is this idea that interpretive research is objective. And of course, what he pointed out is that you read this over and over again, but people think that interpretive research is subjective. That's the common accepted wisdom, if you like. People say, well, positive research, obviously that's objective, so they say, and interpretive research, that's subjective. And the usual description of interpretive research is to do with sense making. So it's making sense of what people think, their subjective feelings, what they think about things, their opinions and so forth. It's to do with subjective meanings. It's often read this, good for exploratory research. So the sort of usual idea is that actually works quite well. It's sort of an easy way of justifying it. You say, well, qualitative research, interpretive research is good for when you're exploring something, you don't understand the subject very well, but once we understand it, once we know what the variables are, once we know what they should be, then we can move on to objective research or positivist research. We can now start testing hypotheses and so forth. So that's the usual way people think of the relationship to interpretive research and positive research. And what Alan pointed out, suggested, is that that's not correct. That interpretive research is objective. And let me just give you a simple example. If you think of survey research as very common, people do things objective. Just think of the last time you filled out a survey. What was that about? When they asked you, what did you think about something, what was that? Was it your opinions? All of a sudden, when you combine that one person, your own subjective feelings, you fill that in, you combine that by 200 people, does that mean 200 times subjective is objective? Well, anyway. Now, so this is the usual idea that qualitative research is objective and interpretive research is subjective. And I'm just focusing now on the interpretive part. Now, I'll just summarize Alan Lee's argument first. And I've got a few additional points to make, of course, but the first one was about social structure. He says, suppose a researcher, and I'm using his exact words, says, suppose a researcher seeks to interpret what a human actor means. You first of all need to collect data, some facts about the social structure, kinship structure, organisation structure that the actor is in. So you need to know where they fit. Okay, you work for a university, you need to know something about the university structure. Obviously, if you're a lecturer, well, where does that fit in the structure? It's obvious. So you need to know something about the social structure. Now, if you consider that social structure and the people within it, then Alan's point is, well, that structure existed before the people were there, so this university was here before you joined, I presume, unless you founded it, and it will exist after you leave. So the social structure keeps going. There'll still be lecturers and there'll still be senior lecturers and professors before you and after you. That structure's still there. Still got a rector that came in, or a deputy rector. He's still got some power. There'll still be someone like that after you leave. So that's this point, that the social structure is independent of the actual people that are in it. That was the first argument at any one time. And for these people, that social structure is objective. So the rector has some power, controls some resources, money, for example, buildings, those things are objective. So Alan says, therefore, if you accept that argument, so interpretive research, which accepts it, is objective. Because all interpretive researchers, we talk about social structures and things. That's something we do talk about those things. So there we are. So that's his first argument. And he gave an example of Native American kinship. And this is kinship it's coming back again. It was a very popular topic in anthropology when I studied it. And kinship is who you're allowed to marry. Who can you marry? And and in our culture, of course, Western culture, you can marry who you fall in love with. We have a very romantic idea of who you can marry. And then we find out later it doesn't quite work, but never mind, that's the idea. You fall in love with someone and then a couple of years later, idea, never mind. But in many cultures, that's not the case. The idea is you actually have to marry a certain person. You've got no choice in the matter. Well, you might have a choice of which group it is, but your choice is pretty limited. And this gets very complicated. So, in fact, one of the interesting things is that, and since I'm in Canberra right now in Australia, it took anthropologists 100 years to figure out some of the Aboriginal kinship systems. Because what's interesting about the Aborigines is that they might have the most simple technology in terms of what it used to have. Of course, they're simple technology, but they had the most complicated social structure. They're the most complicated kinship system in the world. And it was this 8-section system. And it took anthropologists 100 years to figure it out. And what it is, this 8-section system it means that every tribe is basically, you belong to one of 8 groups. They're not all 8, some are 4 and some are 8, but this is one example of 8. So for example, let's look at this one. Each group of the 8 has a totem, so they have an egret or something to represent them. And if you're a young fellow in the first one, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but the first one there, you can only marry a female from the Bururangi, I'm not sure how you say that, but any of that one. And your children will be the other group, the other one, the third one. So this is, and it sort of, basically, when you think about it, it takes 8 generations for the whole thing to work through. So if you're an anthropologist coming in and studying this culture, what you see right now is not what is, all you see is someone getting married. But it would take, you'd have to be there for 8 generations to see the whole thing play out. So you see, this is an interesting point that we talk about, social reality and virtual reality and so forth. But you can't see the social structure. If you just go and look and see an Aboriginal village now, you cannot see that structure. Because you only see it when it's enacted, someone getting married. And then you only see 1/8 of it. Only see a bit of it. So the whole thing, takes ages to get through. So the question is this a real structure? Is it a virtual structure? Is it in people's minds? Well, yes, in people's minds, they all know it. Every person in that village knows they can't, if you're a fellow and you attract someone, you can't marry her, unfortunately. She's not in this particular moiety. And this is what, so there's a social structure. It's objective. in the sense that if you tried to marry the wrong person, you'd get into serious trouble. Now, you could do it theoretically, I suppose, if you move to Sydney or you move out of the village. So you can break the rules, but there are serious consequences of breaking those rules. So, is this kinship structure, is it objective? Is it subjective? I'll leave that for you to think about. Alan Lee's second point was, well, actually, if you look at what interpretive researchers actually say, what some famous interpretive researchers say, they say, yes, it is objective. So, for example, the classic book by Berger and Luckman, they popularised this idea of social construction of reality. That's the name of the book. And, and they said that reality is socially constructed, which I suppose a lot of people accept now, even positivists accept that nowadays. None of them are, all of them would be post-positivists, I think, nowadays. But they say society is a human product. Society is an objective reality. Man is, because it was back in the 60s, man is a social product. So it's both. It's both a subjective reality and it's objective. Mills, C. Wright Mills, talks about objectivity. Giddens says, talks about structural properties of social systems. These structural properties have a certain objectivity, like the kinship structure, like the structure of this university. There's a certain objectivity to it. And talks about that, vis-a-vis the individual agent. Weber talks about, about the rules. There are certain objective rules that you have to follow. And if you break those rules, there are consequences. So these are what Alan Lee's 2 points. And so his conclusions were, first of all, interpretive research is objective. Now, of course, he then slightly qualified it by saying, well, information system research insists that interpretive research is only subjective or wrong. That is, so it is subjective, of course, but it's also objective. Can be rigorous and can be quantitative, integrated with positivist and statistical research. There's his points. So that's his argument in a nutshell, which I've summarised. So my own view now, which I'll come to, is that I agree with most of what pretty much all of what he said. I would want to go a bit further and say that, in my view, subjective reality is by definition intersubjective. It has to be. Think of a kid. From the moment a child is born, they're hearing a language. They're hearing Aboriginal language, or they're hearing English language. And they're told, this is a chair, this is a table, don't touch that. They're told rules. They learn the language. So from the moment they're born, basically, they start hearing language. And the human brain is pretty amazing. They learn pretty quickly, actually. Within a year or two, they start talking, and then you can't stop them talking after a while. So if you speak a language, you have to follow rules. But to make sense, in English, you have to follow certain rules. If you don't follow those rules, people can't make sense of it. Often I end up writing these editor's reports saying, I'm sorry, you need to improve your writing because I can't understand what you're talking about. You have to follow the rules. These rules are, yes, they're malleable. We break them sometimes, like advertisers love to break the rules to draw attention to something and misspell something deliberately, but that in itself is part of the rules. They're breaking the rules deliberately to gain attention, like misspelling a name, a word or something. And my argument would be that it's often easier to break concrete, it's easier to smash this concrete than it is sometimes to change people's perceptions. We often say that first impressions count. You get a first impression of somewhere, we get set in our mind that that person is like that, or this city is like that, and it's very hard to change. It almost becomes like concrete. So, and intersubjective reality even more. Now, I was interested in the Prime Minister's remarks this morning, just as we have to be driving here. Your Prime Minister was talking about the real war is, well, what's really important with the coming war is changing hearts and minds. You have to win hearts and minds. That's the real battle, I think, we've got in our hands in the West right now, to win hearts and minds. But changing people's minds is pretty difficult. It's not easy to change, once people made up their mind about something, it's pretty hard to change. So anyway, my argument here is that, so interpretive research is objective and subjective. Yes, it does focus on what people think, but social reality, in my view, this intersubjective reality has an objective quality, or at least seems objective. It's pretty hard to break some rules without serious consequences, put that way. And now I'd like to add to this with some philosophical justification. The first point comes from hermeneutics. Now, I haven't got time to talk a little about hermeneutics, but because there's quite a few concepts in hermeneutics, but one of them at least is this concept of autonomization. Now, hermeneutics briefly is a philosophy about the meaning of text. What does text mean? That's what hermeneutics is all about, and I've used quite a bit in my own research. But one of these concepts is autonomization. And Ricoeur, one of the hermeneutic philosophers, says there's an important distinction between written text and verbal, when you say something. When you write something down, it takes on an objective reality. It's there. As soon as you write something down, it takes on a life of its own. So, for example, Aristotle wrote something a few thousand years ago. He's long gone. We can't go back and ask him what he really meant, but we can read what he said. It's still on the page. Nicomachean Ethics is right there. You could read the translation, of course, in English of what he said. And so the point here I'm making here is that the written text has an autonomous, independent existence of the author. So, it's independent now of me as the writer. And once that happens, it's not just written text, but as soon as it gets out there, it could be a video nowadays, I suppose, or record, doesn't have to be written text actually. Anything, as soon as it's out there, it's published in the public domain, whether a video or something, it's impossible to take it back. It's out there now. And a good example of this, I think, is Tony Hayward, who's the CEO of BP. If you remember during the oil crisis in the Gulf in the US, and in the middle of this big crisis, he said, "I'd like my life back." Now, as soon as he said that, his career was over. Because there's all this oil, gushing out into the Gulf. People's livelihoods are being destroyed. The fishermen can't fish anymore. There's pollution on the beach, one of the biggest oil disasters in the world. And all this, people said, all this guy can think about is he wants to have a holiday. He's too tired. I want my life back. I'd just like to go back like it was. What was he thinking? If you're the CEO of this company, you should be thinking about yourself. You should be thinking about solving the problem. So as soon as he said, of course he apologized for it later. He said, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that." It was too late. It was out there. Once you say something, like imagine elections, often the case, politicians say something, and once they say it, it's too late to take it back. It's this, what I would call, it's objective, it's probably more correct to say, intersubjective reality. Reality. Everyone thinks, the public thinks what this person said was bad. It was just a bad thing to say. And the career's over. That's it. And we've had an election recently in New Zealand. A few politicians said a few things which they've apologised for later, but they can't take it back. It still comes back to haunt them. So there's this first concept then of autonomization hermeneutics, that written text takes on an objective reality, and of course it still has to be interpreted, but still, there is this intersubjective reality to it. Another concept that sort of supports this idea is the concept of syntactic meaning and semiotics. Now, semiotics is another philosophy. A lot of concepts. Just want to refer to one, and that is this concept of syntactic. So semiotics study concerned with the arts of signs and symbols and their meaning. What do they mean? Like a flag, national flag. Our current Prime Minister wants to change the flag, wants to get rid of the Union Jack in the corner. So we want a New Zealand flag, our own flag, that's the idea. But this flag has a meaning, and it's only a piece of cloth. But if someone today burnt a piece of cloth, that actually very similar to that, but it's got if you had the actually that is the Australian one. No, it's New Zealand. So if you had the Australian flag out there and they just burnt a flag, what would happen out here? Just a piece of cloth. If someone burnt a flag right now outside, there'd be a lot of trouble. There'd be security all around the place. There'd be a lockdown just for burning a piece of cloth. But the point is that these things are symbols. These are powerful. So, but these signs and symbols have rules. So, there are rules about what you can do with the flag. If it's flying half-mast, we know what that means, something important died. If you're burning a flag, that's an obvious sign of disrespect. It means you hate people or the country, whatever. And there's rules. But the thing is, with these, in semiotics, the syntactic level refers to the rules governing the use of these signs. So there are rules. It's not just subjective. In other words, you can't just do what you like with that flag. If you just burn a piece of cloth out there, it's not just a piece of cloth. It is the Australian flag. It stands for Australia. You're insulted. If you're an Australian, it's insulting you as a person. Some people would probably punch them, or they'd be arrested. So these signs have rules, and these rules, I would argue, are objective. When Mandela died, all around the world, flags were half-mast. He's not he's a famous person. People respect him. So there are rules about what happens at those times. It's not just your own personal opinion. Everyone did it. And in fact, if you want to drive a car, you have to know what the signs mean. You have to know what the symbols mean on these road signs. Fortunately, they're fairly international now, so you can drive almost anywhere. They're all the same now. Didn't used to be, but they are now. But you have to know what the rules are, and you don't get your license unless you know what the rules are. So, now I'd like to quote, Alan Lee quoted some famous interpretive researchers. I'll quote some not so famous researchers from our own field, from information systems, and see what they say. Now, Ulrike Schultz, she wrote this paper. It was a special issue for MISQ on interpretive research, intensive research they called it. I just have this quote from her article. She looked at, her focus was on knowledge workers in a library setting, and she was looking at, it's knowledge management, knowledge work, and professionals in the situation. And what is interesting about her paper is that it was a confessional ethnography. You think very subjective. Probably the most subjective form of ethnography you think of, confessional. Some people would say it's navel gazing almost, it's looking at itself. Anyway, this is what she says. Contribution for this research makes to theory lies in its demonstration of subjectivity and objectivity as a duality in knowledge work rather than a dualism. In other words, they're both at play at the same time. As a duality, subjectivity and objectivity are interlocked in a reciprocal relationship so that both are always necessary. So here we have an avowed interpretive researcher doing confessional ethnography, and she's saying in her article, actually both subjectivity and objectivity go together. So it's not just subjective. So that's one article. Another one, Berendt and Jungjin Yu, done an article in ISR, and they're focusing on is a case study actually of NASA, and it was it's sort of the theory is institutional theory and stuff, and they say we focus on institutional logics, we accommodate the ability of humans to set their own course, blah blah blah, and idiosyncratic matter. Yet they do so acknowledging that this agency they have is entrenched in eons of human history and the objective social realities into which humans are born. So the point they're making is that, okay, you come along to this university, the Defence Force Academy, and you've got your own subjectivity, but hey, guess what? There's a whole lot of history here, a whole lot of people already here, a social structure that already exists, is basically what they're saying, and this social structure is objective. Yes, you can try and change it. If you become a full professor, you can maybe change some things, obviously. You want to improve some things, improve that, whatever. But still, it's sort of, I'll probably say more intersubjective, but it is certainly, it's out there to a certain extent. You can only do so much. You can't change everything. You know, you've got to work out what you can change, what you can't. Some things you can't change. It's one good lesson, actually, that we all need to learn sometimes. A few more examples. Michael Barrett and Jeff Walsham. This is their article in ISR some time ago. They say they're interpretive. Obviously, they're both interpretive researchers. If you know them, we know that's what they do. Interpretive research. It's a social construction. Reality is social construction. But they say our underlying beliefs are that knowledge can be best achieved by getting inside the world of those generating it. So it's subjective. But then they go on to say in the very same article, but they talk about this electronic trading and work transformation at the institutional and individual levels. So they now talk about institutions, which are of course outside individual subjectivities. So they're talking about this institutional structure that is sort of out there, as it were. And some more. Wanda Olakowski talks about managers' judgments of work achieve objective status. They puts in quote marks, but they achieve an objective status, and they reinforce the policies, procedures, and so forth that shape behaviour. So, the way I interpret what she's saying is, so personal judgments, what people think, become objective. And they, in turn, influence other people's subjectivity. A simple example of that I would put is the ERA. Think of the journal rankings that we have. People argue about them when they're being formed. In fact, I remember I was associate dean of research at the time when we were, we used to go along to the meetings of the business research deans of Australia, just go along to that meeting. And in those days, it was all lots of argument, people arguing about, journals and which was good, which was bad, this sort of stuff. But in the end, it's published as ERA list. And now, we still use an Altman, A star, and A, and stuff like that, we still got that. These become objective. In fact, you get, in some universities, you get money based on if you publish in an A star journal. So it started out being subjective, if you like, people arguing, or was it subjective to start with? That's a good argument. Anyway, it becomes objective, and we still have the Australian Business Deans Council rankings come out recently, 2013. So ERA's gone, the ABDC list is still there. We still use it. These become objective rules. I'd like now to give you some examples now from ICT in development, since the topic of the conferences relate to that. So let's see if we can relate this to this idea that interpretive research is objective to some of these projects that my students and colleagues have been working on. Got 3 projects, one in India, one's to do with social entrepreneurial startups, and the third one is in Taiwan, Aboriginal village in Taiwan. So the first one, India. Ranjan, one of my students, he did his ethnographic research of agricultural marketing information system in India. The system was set up by the state government. Basically, it had an emancipatory ideal to try and improve the returns that the farmers get for their products, so it improves their livelihood. It's a good thing for governments to do, try and improve the lives of their people. So this was the idea. And this is what it looks like. And essentially what he did was he focused on the perceptions, interpretive, focused on the perceptions of the stakeholders. So it's very much, what do they think? What do these stakeholders think? And their practices. So it's focusing on what they think and what they do. Unfortunately, what he found was that, well, a whole lot of things he found, of course, a whole lot of different things, but I'll just focus on one of them. The top one here, say, farmers do quality manipulations. Just look at that one for a second. These are all the themes that came out after all this analysing the data and stuff, and there's a lot of big themes, but one of the big themes was distrust, and leading to that was this one here. Farmers do quality manipulations. Now, so unfortunately, the culture of this auction, of the things, you could say is one of no one trusts each other. There's sort of corruption, basically, full of corruption, the whole thing, which is why the system didn't work in the end. It was just, as we know, garbage in, garbage out. You've got bad data, it's going to be bad. You're going to get garbage out. That's basically the story of this. But this top one here, what do the farmers do? Well, the farmers get paid based on the quality of their product. Now, when they first come into the yard, so they're coming in, they come bringing their sacks of, say, chilies to the auction. The first thing is inspector, has to look at the product and say, okay, this is quality, high quality, it's poor quality, whatever. And based on the quality, you get, you get better price, of course, high quality. Now, what do the farmers do in that situation?
You put your best chilies on the top.
Exactly. Put your best chilies on the top and all the rubbish down the bottom. So, that's what everyone does. So how do you know the quality? So it's sort of, from the moment they start, you've got the potentially incorrect data. Do the inspectors check to the bottom of the sack? Well, touching chilies, you get pretty hot, right? So probably not. So anyway, essentially, there's a lot of there's a whole lot of things going on. But essentially, so here we have an endemic problem. It's not just the farmers, of course, it's all the other, a lot of the other ones as well. But the endemic problem, this problem of corruption, people not trusting one another and so forth, ended up meaning that the company that was supposed to be, they installed the system and got it running and so forth, they end up being sued. They end up suing someone else. Ends up in a complete mess, and in the end, it's cancelled and it's a failed project, unfortunately. So good intentions by the state government, the project failure. Now, the question is then, relate this to what I said before about subjectivity and objectivity. Is corruption an objective problem in India in this situation? Is it a subjective problem? Is it objective? I'll let you think about that. Here's another example. One of my students, actually just finished now, while he's finishing, he's got his, it's just about done. He studied Kiva. Kiva is it's the new model of giving. I suppose you call it Giving 2.0. This particular organisation started in Silicon Valley. So Silicon Valley startup, and he is studying these social entrepreneurial startups. These are startups, unlike the money-making ones, which we're familiar with, like Google and so forth. These are social enterprise. They want to do good. They want to help the world be a better place. And there's quite a few of those companies or organizations around the place. So this particular organization, you've probably all heard of World Vision and Red Cross, these are organizations. Well, this is the Giving 2.0 model. Think of the old model, say World Vision or something like that, some charities. They send you brochures in the mail. They have people physically collecting, like standing at the shops saying, will you give $20 to the Red Cross or whatever. And it's all a very physical model with often a relatively high overhead of administration. So you give $1 to a flood relief somewhere, 10, 15 cents goes to admin, and only 80 cents whatever goes to the actual people, right? So this model, all on the internet. And the idea is it's person to person. So with Kiva, they're the largest now, sort of one of these largest micro-lending organizations in the world now. So you can say, okay, I like the look of this guy. I want to give that person a $25 loan. And you loan money to them. So you just give money. And the idea is that they have a huge database now of people with their stories, with their photos and whatnot. And the idea is that there's no transaction fees. They got PayPal to agree to waive all transaction fees. So you give $1, or $25 rather, all those $25 goes to your entrepreneur. And the idea is to give it's a new model of giving, instead of just helping people to, well, still need to help people recover from disaster stuff, but this is entrepreneurship. The idea is the best way to get these people to get out of poverty is to give them money to start a business or to, start a new job. So that's the idea of this. And what he did, Paul is my student. He used to live in Silicon Valley, but then he moved to Auckland because his wife got a job in Auckland. Actually, she works in the development, did work in development at our university. But anyway, Silicon Valley is this new organizational form of sort of Giving 2.0, and he did this ethnography of Kiva. So of course he knew some of the people already who started it in Silicon Valley, but they did some field work as well in Indonesia and some other places, looking at what they do. And Kiva is now the largest database of third world entrepreneurs. That's what they claim. And it's been growing exponentially, growing quite well. Now, the thing is, if you think of development and underdevelopment, is poverty an objective problem, or is it a subjective problem? Are these problems, are they just subjective? Do people just feel poor, or are they poor? It's a question to think about. Now, my third project I'll talk about is in Taiwan. They have another is a PhD student, and finished now a few years ago. But Taiwanese government wants to improve the livelihood of disadvantaged people through ICT. So ICT is the way that they think to improve things. And so they've got this, they've invested resources to narrow the digital divide. And Cecilia, who was a student at the time, she started this project to improve the livelihood of these Aboriginal people. They're called Aborigines, Indigenous people in Taiwan. Short history of Taiwan is that, depends where you start, I suppose, but anyway, they were ruled by the Japanese for a while, until Second World War. After that, then the Kuomintang came in, fled from China, communist China, and they've ruled the country ever since. So now it's the mainland Chinese, if you like, they were mainland Chinese, are now in power, and the Aborigines are minorities in their own country. Now, this particular project that we studied was designed to improve their welfare, because they have low literacy rates, high unemployment, so on. You know, they live in poor villages, in mountain areas, so they're miles away from anywhere. I visited there actually. It's a beautiful location actually, but you know, obviously they're very poor. Anyway, this project was designed to improve their lives, improve their education, and the project was so successful that it became a showcase on TV. TV crews visiting, and radio program, newspaper articles saying how good it was. And this became an example of supposedly best practices for this kind of project in Taiwan. So this was the example. Problem is that as Cecilia did the research, to start with, she got just the official story, even from the Aborigines. They said, yeah, it's wonderful, fantastic. It was all good. Then after a year, she was there for 2 years actually doing field work. After a year, all of a sudden, you started to get to know the Aborigines better, of course, and they started to trust her and tell her more stuff. And eventually a whole new world started to open to her as she became trusted. All of a sudden, this project was not so rosy after all. And in fact, it was just the opposite. They felt left out. They were marginalised. They weren't really listened to. You know, this is what these people wanted to do. They wanted to help us. We're here to help. That's what they did. It was a wonderful story. But in fact, we don't feel we're any better off than before. In fact, in some ways, they're worse off than more. They now owe money for things and stuff. And so in this case, our theoretical argument was that it was this context, this sort of what we call post-colonial context. It's like this mainstream media, the culture. You know, ICT is such a good thing. It was all almost like a cage for these Aborigines, and even they themselves agreed with it to start with. Even they themselves said it was great to start with. But after a while, they, you know, sort of the truth came out, if you like. So my question here again is, you know, is this context, because it's the social structure that's there, people with resources, people with power, they don't have it. It is, you know, is that objective? And so I guess I'm agreeing with Alan that I think interpretive research is subjective and objective. I think positive research is pretty subjective as well, most of the time, all the time. Anyway, that's another argument. But it's both. I would say development and underdevelopment, of course, which is one of the themes today. These are real problems. In fact, as the Prime Minister said this morning, winning hearts and minds is the real battle. And I think that's right. And development, obviously, development budgets are part of that usually. You know, China and whatnot, you know, gives lots of money for development projects to win hearts and minds. That's what it's about often. And I think, so I just would think that interpretive research is an excellent way of understanding what is going on, both subjective and objective realities. And this is objective, of course. This is just to end on Lord of the Rings. The world is changing. I feel it in the water, I feel it in the earth, and I smell it in the air. So, thank you.